everyone, and thank you for joining the Healthy Living and Social Care Scrutiny Committee being held virtually Tuesday 11th of January 2022 at 5 p.m. May I wish everyone a Happy New Year, and just to remind everyone that this meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, then they can please put their hand up, either via the raise hand function or on the screen. I'll try and pick you out. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of this recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues or to grab the attention of myself, the chairman, or the Democratic Services Officer. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, then they should let the chairman or Democratic Officer know. If they have a webcam, then they should try turning this off, as this will help with the broadband or Wi-Fi bandwidth, so you can at least hear the conversation and then be heard when you're speaking. So thank you, everyone. So on with the show. Agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. Have we had anyone?
None received by myself, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item 2, minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of December 2021. Does anyone want to raise anything, or are we happy to just move the minutes? Does anyone want to oppose?
Move.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Jarvie. Anyone to second? Councillor Neil Thomas. Thank you very much. Now moving on to agenda item 3, to receive declarations of interest. Anyone would like to declare anything? Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, now on to a trio of reports from the Director of Social Services. The first one, agenda item 4, is the population needs assessment. So welcome to the Scrutiny Committee this evening, Fiona Kinghorn. Hi there.
Thank you very much, Councillor Griffiths. And for those that don't know me, I'm the Executive Director of Public Health in Cardiff Vale Health Board. And I've got with me Dr. Suzanne Wood, who's a consultant in public health medicine, and Dr. Emily Clark, who's a public health registrar, both with our local public health team. And Emily has done a substantial amount of work on this needs assessment, and Suzanne has overseen and provided supervision and support. So really, if we move on to, we're just trying to put the slides up to share with you, and I will just introduce and then I'll hand over to Emily. So if we're able to move to the next slide, Emily. So this needs assessment is a statutory requirement under the Social Services and Wellbeing Act. And it requires us to do an assessment of the care and support needs of the population, including carers who need support, an assessment of the range and level of services required to meet those needs, including preventative services. And the first population needs assessment was produced or published in 2017. So this is the second such needs assessment. I think it's really important to say that these needs assessments represent a mark in time. But of course, through the Regional Partnership Board, there is, of course, ongoing needs identification, service development. It should be an iterative process. It shouldn't just be one static point in time. But this is a big piece of work at this point in time that will inform, subsequent years. This needs assessment also aligns with the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act through a number of mechanisms. So we know that the population needs assessment must have wellbeing at its core. And I know the work of the Regional Partnership Board absolutely has wellbeing at its core. It needs to incorporate the principles of the Wellbeing of Future Generation Act. So long-term integration, involvement, collaboration and prevention. And I think the methods that have been used in this needs assessment in itself embodies that sustainability principle. And the needs assessment has to align with the wellbeing assessments, which investigate social, economic, environmental and cultural wellbeing of an area, which provides a detailed overview of the wider determinants of health. And as we know, Vale Public Service Board oversees that complementary needs assessment. And actually the Code of Practice within the Social Services and Wellbeing Act and requirements for this needs assessment states that all local authorities in the local health board geographical area must form a partnership arrangement with that health board to undertake such population needs assessments, and should produce a combined population assessment report. So I'm going to now hand on to Emily, who's going to run through really just a bit more nuance around the purpose of this needs assessment and to take us through the themes of the needs assessment. So thanks, Emily.
Thank you, Fiona, for your introduction. So I'll take us through the purpose, the methods used for the population needs assessment, and then the overarching findings that we've identified. These statements are taken from the Code of Practice, and there's much more detail in the Code of Practice around the purpose of the population needs assessment. But just to really highlight the need that the population needs assessment will produce a clear and specific evidence base in relation to care and support needs, which will help underpin the delivery of statutory functions and inform planning and operational decisions. The population needs assessment will drive change, in particular through a focus on preventative approaches. The population needs assessment will support resource and budgetary decisions and ensuring services and outcomes are targeted, sustainable and effective and efficient. The P&A population needs assessment will also promote social enterprises, cooperatives, user-led services and the third sector, and be taken into account in the production of health and wellbeing strategies. The Code of Practice identifies 9 core themes, which are shown on the screen at the moment, but also allows for additional scope to include additional themes if that's particularly relevant to a region. So as per the 2017 population needs assessment, we've chosen to include the 3 additional themes of substance misuse, asylum seekers and refugees, and veterans as well. For clarity and for ease of reading, we've split these themes into 17 different chapters, which can be found in the draft population needs assessment. And we've then linked these to the Regional Partnership Board programmes of work. So we have Starting Well, which links to the Children and Young People chapters, Living Well, which relates to the bulk of the population needs assessment, and Ageing Well, which links into the Older People chapter. And it's really important to note as well that many people might feel involved with more than one of these chapters. The population needs assessment provides an update on the 2017 population needs assessment, as well as further development based in part upon the supplementary guidance which was issued in March 2021. The supplementary guidance recommended including the impact of COVID-19, the socio-economic duty, and providing increased emphasis on the triangulation of information to provide the so what. We have used methods similar to the 2017 population needs assessment, and we've used existing reports, assessments, population and service data wherever possible, and that's to reduce duplication but also help align the population needs assessment with other bodies of work as well. The Code of Practice requires us to consider a broad range of individuals, groups and organisations and provide those people with an opportunity to articulate what they perceive the needs of an area to be. We are asked to reflect the diversity of people in the community and to consider the specific communication needs of individuals and population groups. We conducted a number of different surveys. We had a survey for adults and the general public, a survey for children and young people, and a survey for adults in HMP Cardiff. We also ran 23 focus group discussions which mapped broadly to the 17 chapters on the previous screen. We also ran a professional and provider survey as well. We set up themed groups with professional leads, and these included a representative from each local authority and the health board. And for some of the chapters, we included additional representatives as well. So, for example, the Secure Estate chapter, we had representatives from HMP Cardiff join us as well. These themed groups enabled us to really understand the context of each of the themes included within the population needs assessment and helped guide the data collection and interpretation process. In terms of the alignment, we had regular meetings with the leads of the wellbeing assessments for both Cardiff and the Vale of Glamorgan throughout the production of the population needs assessment. And then in order to align with the National Outcomes Framework, we included statements from the National Outcomes Framework as anchors within focus group discussions. I'm now able to present some of the overarching findings for care and support needs. So these findings were common amongst many or all of the themes that we looked at. And specific findings for each of the population groups can be found in the relevant chapter in the draft report. And chapters should be considered together as many people feel that they might be part of more than one theme. It's important to note as well that we've noticed improvements in care and support services across all of the population groups since 2017, and that's despite the challenges of COVID. And we know that COVID-19 has had a significant number of impacts, including increasing demand for services, in particular mental health services, and changing the models of delivery for many services as well. We've structured the findings based on the social ecological model, which considers the individual first, followed by their community, and then the wider determinants of health. So in terms of individual care and support needs, we found that people's independence must be maintained and facilitated within decisions for care and support, and any decision should be based on consultation and co-production with the person that they affect. In terms of community level factors, social isolation was already identified in the 2017 population needs assessment, and it has been exacerbated for many due to COVID-19 and restrictions, which has had far-reaching consequences for physical and mental health and well-being. A holistic approach to physical and mental health is needed, which includes improved access to services and a reduction in waiting lists, and information provision to improve people's awareness of support already available to them. In terms of the wider determinants, employment came out as desired by many people that we spoke to, and that's to improve personal finances, but also to provide a sense of purpose, a social role, reduce isolation, and people identified employment as being helpful to protect their mental health and well-being. Housing and accommodation needs to be available, accessible, safe and supportive of what matters to the individual. And inequalities were discussed in all of the chapters, in particular in terms of socioeconomic deprivation, access to services and health outcomes. And we know that COVID-19 has had a disproportionate impact across the population, and that's in part due to pre-existing inequalities of the social determinants of health that have been exacerbated both by COVID-19 directly and associated restrictions. Next, we're able to present the overarching findings regarding the range and level of services required to meet the need. These are structured as preventative services, including assets which support people's well-being, community-based services, and lastly, partnership approaches. We have many of these services in place already. Some may now have enhanced needs due to the changing context, including COVID, and some elements might be new requirements entirely. Within each of the chapters of the P&A, the recommendations flow from these range and level of services identified, and recommendations are bespoke to each of the chapters and provide tangible actions for organisations to take. So firstly, thinking of prevention, healthy behaviours, these are identified as being able to prevent needs of rising or escalating. So healthy behaviours such as physical activity to improve mental well-being, promote or prevent physical deconditioning, which in turn might help prevent falls. We learnt about early identification, diagnosis and intervention, which is able to support people at the right time and promote better outcomes for them. Social support, including the maintenance of a social role, and digital inclusion, which is especially important in COVID times. Advocacy to enable people to express their views and wishes, and cares focused on delivering services as close to people's homes as possible. Throughout all of our engagement work, we had many examples of assets which people identified as supportive to their well-being. At the individual level, individual sources of support such as friends, families, neighbours were really important to people. Local community support like community groups and such as music, arts and sports groups were really key to support people's well-being. Throughout the engagement work, we had examples of named members of staff from local authority, NHS and third sector services identified as being helpful to people. We heard that people with lived experience were really valued in providing peer support, perhaps facilitated through third sector organisations, but also within service providers, and this supports the need for inclusive recruitment across sectors. And we heard both from service users and service providers regarding the need for sustainable funding as well. At the community level, within each of the population groups that we looked at, there were various transition points between different services, between local authority and NHS services, or as people transition between children's to adult services, or perhaps as people leave military service and join the community. And the importance of providing that seamless experience to service users as they transition between different services was identified. We also need equitable, accessible, inclusive services where access is really tailored to the individual to identify any barriers and overcome them, for example, through provision of interpreters, letters in large print, and offering a choice of platforms for service delivery. We also need timely access to high quality care and support services, respite care provision, and an increased awareness of services available both amongst service users but also amongst service providers to really help that signposting. Lastly, thinking about the partnership approach, many respondents to our engagement work didn't ask for traditional care and support services, but identified that needs could be met through supportive employers and access to education, for example, through provision of reasonable adjustments and inclusive recruitment. Accommodation provision, which gives people choice, for example, over where they are able to live, and supporting their independence, and a welcoming community and enabling wider environment. So, for example, we heard that some people were apprehensive about using public spaces because of the behaviours of others. So promoting that considerate use of public spaces, improving bystander awareness of violence against women and domestic abuse, promoting accessible transport options and travel training, for example. In terms of the next step, this population needs assessment report will be presented at Cabinet on the 28th of February and full council on the 7th of March, and the final report will be published on the 1st of April. The population needs assessment will support further assessments such as the market stability report, planning such as the area plans, and support future RPB regional partnership board engagement work. Future versions of this report will adopt a hybrid model approach where we're able to update some of the data more regularly, such as when we receive the census reports. And as we do periodic engagement work, we can then update the future versions of the population needs assessment report as well. So I'll just leave you with a few quotes from our focus group discussions. And all that's left for me to say now is thank you very much for listening, and I'd be delighted to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Fiona, Emily, Susanna. Is there any questions of the report or the presentation that supports it? Hi, Councillor Nugent-Finn, I see your hand up. Hi.
Hello, Chair. Thank you very much. Thanks very much. Great. And I did read the report prior to it, so I was a little tiny bit more au fait with it, which helps, doesn't it? The partnership development with Vale Morgan, were there any particular findings or any recommendations as a result of what the Vale presented?
Do you want to come in, Emily? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I was doing a rapid scan of all the findings. I'd have to go through each chapter individually because as we've engaged people across multiple different of the themes we've included. Certainly, where we have that data available,
Perhaps more collectively then, was there anything that really, you could perhaps summarise with regards to that, the findings? We had an opportunity to present and work in partnership. So, in sort of presenting that, was there anything that was particularly highlighted, or areas of recommendation, or, what we did particularly well in or not? That's the sort of theme I meant, really, if that's any help.
I wonder if we could take that away,
of course,
because actually that helps, doesn't it, when you're doing to triangulate information. And I wonder if maybe Emily, we could take that away, and if there are particular findings. I guess many of the individualised or focus groups were focused on their own individual and experience of services, but there may be some comments around partnership that we could feed directly back to you. If that's helpful.
Absolutely. Very helpful. Thank you very much.
We can do that.
I've got one other question, if that's all right. The 17 themes, really topical. Great to see them. Were they in any sort of needs-led order, or are they just sort of, if you just literally put a list together of everything that we've identified? And obviously there was a lot of crossover with them all, wasn't there? I mean, young people were mentioned about 2 or 3 times, but so is it any order, or is it just your collaboration of everything that we need to be looking at here as a theme?
In terms of the 17 themes, most of them were derived from the Code of Practice, which stipulates 9 themes that we need to include. We've then, the 2017 Population Needs Assessment identified asylum seekers and refugees, substance misuse and veterans as particularly relevant to the Cardiff and Vale of Glamorgan area. And we've chosen to include them again for this iteration because we feel that it's important to capture their experiences and needs as well. Where we have split them from those themes into the 17 chapters, for some of them it was quite an obvious or 2 very distinct groups that we were looking at. So, for example, learning disability and autism, we felt was more appropriate as 2 separate chapters. And regarding, she mentioned the children and young people, the supplementary guidance, which was issued in March of last year, recommended that we look at some subgroups within children and young people with more detail. So, for example, children and young people with complex needs. So that's why we've chosen to include those as a separate chapter.
Okay, so no particular order. It's not in needs-led. It's just a combination of everything. Okay, understood. Lovely, thank you. And the healthy behaviours and the prevention. What's the plan? How are we doing this? We talked about, so again, really topical. It's fantastic. Digital inclusion, healthy living lifestyles. But what's the plan? How are we going to deliver that here in the Vale of Glamorgan?
Maybe I can come in there. I guess it's both through preventative actions, both within the Regional Partnership Board, through the area plan. We're already delivering arenas of work in partnership, I think, with colleagues in local government and third sector. So it's just to build on that, but also through our public service boards. And I think, which lends itself more to the environmental, but we've got a whole Move More, Eat Well plan. So I think we've got many plans, and I think we can just look at the nuance of those plans in light of this needs assessment. And also recently I published my Director of Public Health annual report, which talks about amplifying prevention. And I know I've got discussions, we've paused them while we go through this phase of COVID, but we'll be picking that up hopefully in about February time, just about how do we drive forward some more, just even stronger action in the Vale of Glamorgan, building on what we've done to date. So it'll feed into multiple sets of plans, I'd say.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, all. Thanks for your answers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Nugent-Finn. Thank you. Would anyone else like to ask any questions? Hi, Councillor Thomas. Good evening.
Yeah, hi, good evening. Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. I mean, it is very big, which is one of the reasons why we needed to get it out to members well in advance, so they had a chance to inwardly digest as well. I've got a number of concerns about it, and if you don't mind, I'll go through them, and then you can shout at me at the end. first of all, in the assessment itself, in the surveys and so on that you've got, a lot of the surveys seem to be with very, very small sample groups, which, and I'm quite worried about extrapolating from such a small base, particularly as they are clearly self-selecting groups, people who are willing to engage rather than the ones that need to be cajoled into giving answers, and so we kind of have well, I mean, there's a problem with that in my view. You talk about the situation up to a certain time, but the census happened last year, and I'm wondering whether any of the census data is being included in this, because I can't see it, whether it's available yet. I mean, it's only 10 months since the census last March. It was, so 9 months rather. So is there scope for that? We're talking about extrapolating on population numbers and so on going forward. You talk about quite a big decrease in the percentage of under 16-year-olds. Is this impacted by adults living longer at the moment, or migration from outside the region, or a decrease in birth rate, or what? I mean, having said that, you also talk about the reason about a decrease in life expectancy in the Vale. I'm kind of looking for why that's an expected projection. I mean, COVID will have an impact, and that with people falling off the perches with COVID, that will certainly impact on the older population more than most, as we've seen over the last couple of years, and whether that's factored in as one of the reasons. The mental health impacts, the number of admissions for eating disorders. You talk about admissions, you talk about the number of people seen. You haven't really given us an idea of the number of beds that are actually available for people with eating disorders in mental health, and what the occupancy rate of those beds is. I mean, if they're fully occupied, then extra referrals won't be being seen. So that would have been helpful. Have all the beds been in full use at all times? We aren't talking about. Sorry about that. So I think that our boilerman's just come to the door. The boiler packed in yesterday, so we're labouring into difficulties here. I apologise for the barking dogs. The complex needs figures, the figure in the Vale, which has got a smaller population than Cardiff, is 823, whereas Cardiff, which has got roughly twice the population, it has a 784 is the figure given, and I'm at a loss to understand whether that's to do with referrals, whether that's to do with actual numbers, or whether it's to do with a different way of counting, or a different sort of way of assessing them. Then looking at offenders, I think section 19, there's no mention of pre-justice involvement in diversion or preventative actions, youth work to try to I mean, other members of this committee will know that it's a big issue for me, the need for more youth work and preventive work, diversionary work that can help divert kids away from criminality or just antisocial behaviour or misbehaviour. I'm trying to read my own writing now. No, I think that pretty much sums it up. I know the rest I'm talking about diversion stuff for offending and so on. So yeah, I think that's something to be going on with. Thank you very much.
Do you want to come back? Yeah.
Shall I start with a couple of things and then I'll hand to Emily, and there may be other colleagues in the room as well. Firstly, I'm very impressed, Councillor Thomas, at just the range of things you've highlighted. I mean, it just shows that you've really gone through the needs assessment, so we really appreciate that. Firstly, you're right. It's in any engagement, we have lots of discussions in the Regional Partnership Board and the Public Service Board about how do you engage the widest amount of people possible. And I think COVID is not necessarily helpful or conducive to actually engaging people well. I think Emily highlighted the triangulation of data, and it's very much the sort of survey element we did. The focus groups are really qualitative additions to quantitative data that we find from other data sources. So I think it's a mixed approach, but you're right, some of those are small numbers. And I think what Emily has tried to do within the needs assessment is profile people's feedback as a snapshot, a kind of rich snapshot of feelings of the people that were involved. But just to give you assurance, we don't take focus group results or survey results on their own. They're triangulated with other things. But I think, as I said at the beginning, that continued work of the Regional Partnership Board through the engagement framework, that's a means of trying to engage more people in different ways to really get their feedback on service development. So we take your point on that one. Emily, if I can leave the census element to you. In terms of population numbers going forward, you mentioned life expectancy. I guess there's a mixture of reasons for that, even numbers, and unfortunately life expectancy is based on statistics of death statistics actually, and that includes older people dying from dementia, for example. But we also know that just the change in pattern of inequalities impacts on life expectancy, and then we know that COVID has an additional impact as well. So there are multiple reasons for why we get changes in life expectancy. I guess the decrease in the under 16 age group is due to our birth rate, but Suzanne and Emily may want to comment on that. Emily, do you want to come in with some comments to some of the answers? We'll see if we can cover off all the answers between us.
If I can echo Fiona's comment, thank you so much for reading the draft in so much detail. It's encouraging to, and thank you for raising these points as well. Regarding the census data, unfortunately, the data isn't available yet for inclusion into the population needs assessment, but it is something that I think all authors of the assessments across Wales are very aware of, and I think we're all looking forward to the release of the census data. This would be something that we would be looking to incorporate into the next version of the population needs assessment as soon as possible, as part of that rolling approach that I mentioned earlier. In terms of the number of beds available for mental health and eating disorders, that is something that certainly I can see if I can obtain that data. I agree it would be very interesting to consider. And that's something that I can look into and include when I amend this version of the draft report. Regarding the comments about the numbers of, was it children and young people with complex needs in both Vale of Glamorgan and Cardiff, off the top of my head, I couldn't give you an answer, but that certainly is something that again I can take away and look into in more detail. Just to be sure.
I was just surprised that we had so many more, and we have over 800, whereas Cardiff has less than 700, and yet their population is twice ours, or more than twice ours. I'd expected the underlying figures to be similar in proportion, and the fact that it isn't, means maybe we need to dig down into why.
I completely agree with you, so that's something that I can take away and look into. And then regarding your comment about pre-justice involvement and diversion and preventative actions for children and young people, that is something that again I can look into more and include with the future version of the draft report. So thank you for highlighting that.
And I think, Councillor Griffiths, sorry if I may just say, I should have said at the beginning that the point of bringing the population needs assessment to you at this stage was to have your involvement. And if there are gaps or things that you see, then it just gives us time to do some changes to the needs assessment.
Great, thank you. Rachel Evans, I see your hand up, and Suzanne Wood as well. Would you like to come in at this moment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was just an extension of the observation that Councillor Thomas makes. I'd be very surprised if those figures were accurate, just because of the sizes just can't mean that. And I think there's a question, Emily, that we'll probably realise, won't we? It's how people define it as well. So are we comparing apples and pears, so to speak, or apples and apples? But it's lovely to see you, Emily, and thank you for all the work you've done. See Fiona a lot, but thank you.
Thank you. Suzanne Wood, hi there.
Thanks, and I'd also like to echo the sentiment to Councillor Thomas about the excellent reading of the rather large P&A document. So thank you for looking at it in great detail for us, and indeed it is an opportunity for comments and to enhance the document. So thank you, we do appreciate your very detailed feedback, so that's great. I'd just like to come in regarding the census publication. I've heard through the grapevine that the publication will be not until March or April of this year, which means we cannot include it in this current needs assessment, as we have to publish on the 1st of April and we have to go through a sign-off process for the document in advance of the 1st of April 2022, which is a legal requirement. That is unfortunate. However, as Emily quite rightly says, we do envisage an ongoing rolling data supplement potentially for this, and that'll go online. So we'd hope to be able to publish that data when we do indeed receive it or it is published. Then regarding the under 16s, I do believe it's a combination of both the increase in the percentage of older people in the population, as well as a decrease in their general fertility rate, which we've seen in the last 3 years across most of the age groups in Cardiff and the Vale of Glamorgan. So that's the comment on that, really. And I'd just like to echo Emily's comments that we can add in your observations regarding complex needs and the diversionary activities for young people in particular in relation to the criminal justice system. But thank you, that's really good that you've read it in so much detail, appreciate that.
Thank you, Suzanne. Councillor Thomas, I know they've fed back some feedback to your questions. I know we're talking about recommendations, whether we're happy with the report or feedback. Is there anything you would like to just... Is that feedback all good?
Yeah, no. Thanks for the opportunity, Stephen. But I really didn't expect chapter and verse answers from anybody today, because I mean, you can't drop things on people and expect them to come back that quickly and so on. But the fact that you've taken them on board and we'll be going away and looking at this, that's much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Gray, hi there.
Hi, not to step ahead of a member of the committee, I'm happy Councillor Avett wants to go first. I just wanted to reiterate the time frame I think Emily laid out in terms of, this is going to go through a number of stages with us in the council, and so, if you've not read all of it, or if there's particular things you want to go back to or any further comments, I know that Emily, Suzanne, Fiona, I mean, they'd all love to hear from you, and certainly prior to it coming to Cabinet, and no doubt I'll be introducing that, it would be useful to reflect on the engagement we've had at Scrutiny, but also other stages through the process. So just reiterate that it's not a closed book, and there's more work to do, but it's in a great shape. And thank you to everyone who's done so much so far, and all the challenges of having to engage in different ways because of COVID. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor Avett, hi there.
Hello, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say, even though the report is massive, what's really helped me, I really enjoy the quotes from real people. That really helps me to understand the questions. I mean, some of the things I'm thinking, oh, I could have asked that, on that. Do you know what I mean? And that really helps me. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor David. Hi, Suzanne.
Just to add, and thanks for the comment regarding the qualitative research. There was a lot of really rich information that we had back from the focus groups, and it was great to be able to showcase that during the report. So thank you, I appreciate that you've enjoyed reading the quotes and it brings it alive. And just to mention as well, based on Councillor Gray's point, that we will be able to receive further comments up until the 14th of January, I'm afraid. Because of the sign-off process, it has to go in final form to the various committees and be signed off in anticipation of publication on the 1st of April. Any comments need to go directly to Emily Clark, and we can provide that email outside of this meeting if needed. So thank you.
Great, thanks. Hi.
Chairman, just to add, any comments can be forwarded to our NHS colleagues through myself as well, if necessary.
Brilliant, thank you, Amy. Okay, does anyone have any other questions while we're here? No, I think we're all good. Thank you, Fiona, Suzanne and Emily. Just myself, yeah, it's like a treasure trove of stats and references, so much information, even like things like the projected numbers and how we differ in age between Cardiff and the Vale of Glamorgan is very interesting, and the information, and thank you so much for coming and the work you're doing. So brilliant. The recommendation is to consider the report, and I think we've given some feedback, so that's brilliant. So are we happy to move this agenda item?
Move the recommendation, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Jarvie and Councillor Thomas. I heard Councillor Charles as well. Okay, thank you very much. You can either stay or thank you very much and have a good evening. It's up to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye now. Okay. We can now move on to agenda item 5, which is the Revenue and Capital Monitoring Report, 1st of April to the 30th of November 2021. Gemma Jones, hi there.
Hello, hi, good evening. So this is the revenue position to the end of November, and it's broadly in line with the revenue position that was reported to you previously before Christmas. Just to pick up some key points, so in terms of children and young people services, we're currently projecting an overspend of 618,000, and that's largely due to this increased pressure on children's placements, which has been impacted in part by COVID. So the overspend on children's placements currently projected to be just over £1 million. There's also some additional pressures across the service, offset by some favourable pressures. There is a request for some hardship funding from Welsh Government that's in process at the moment, but hasn't yet been approved. Moving on to adult services, currently projected to be a £500,000 overspend on community care packages. As you'll be aware, this is a very volatile area of the service, and therefore there's an ongoing process to assess a realistic year-end position. That overspend is after allowing for the Social Care Recovery Grant. These overspends will be drawn down from social services reserves. In terms of efficiencies, the position's unchanged from the previous monitoring, so we're expecting to achieve the social services savings in year, but the leisure savings will only be achieved in part. And then moving on to capital, we have some slippage requests given the time of year. So, for instance, Stanwell Play Area and Gladstone Park. We've got some additional costs associated with the Flying Start scheme, and also emergency powers to include the Always Play Opportunity Grant of 223,000. Happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, Gemma. Any questions for Gemma? We will be just considering the contents of this report. Councillor Thomas, I see your hand up.
Yeah, sorry about this. I seem to monopolise these meetings a bit. The cost pressures that we're experiencing now, we know that partly because we're forwarding stuff about looking for care workers and so on, and trying to recruit to that. What pressures are are we enduring due to having to use agency workers to cover for some of our cover for sickness and so on? Are those figures in here? That's it.
Lance, are you able to help, or I mean, it's certainly something I can take away if not.
I mean, there are agency workers being used across the service, so it's not as simple being able to give you one answer. I suppose, you know, they're being used in care homes and so on, and by and large in that sector, the costs are broadly equivalent to our own costs of employing somebody, so it's less of a concern. We have got agencies also in for qualified social workers, predominantly in children and young people services, or funded in adult services through grants. So where we've had ICF grants and posts haven't been agreed to be permanently recruited to, we've got posting, but that's obviously grant funded, so that's less of a concern. The posts in children and young people services, I can see Rachel's turned her camera on, she may have further detail, but they will be offset to some extent by the vacancies that you would expect that those individuals are covering. But we are conscious that those agency costs are much higher than it costs for us to employ people. So I don't know, Rachel, whether there was anything you wanted to add on top of that.
Yeah, thank you. It was just to come in initially to clarify whether it was a question about our care sector or generally about agency staff, but Lance has answered it in its broadest sense. So the cost for agency staff, agency social workers, are significantly higher than for permanent staff. We also have challenges around availability and quality in terms of whether there are agency social workers out there with the skill set that we need, and that's become much harder. And we're having to be much more creative in terms of how we employ agency social workers, so wanting to work less hours, to do pieces of work, perhaps as opposed to holding a caseload. So we're having to adapt all the time just to ensure that we've got enough to meet the statutory responsibility that we have.
Okay, thank you, Rachel and Nance. Anyone else got any other things they would like to add? Okay, so we've considered the position. Is anyone happy to move the item?
Move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Charles, and I'll second. Okay, brilliant. And now we can move on to agenda item 6, which is the update of the Cardiff and Vale of Glamorgan Regional Partnership Board. And I believe this is to be taken through by Kath. Hi, Kath Norman. Hi.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting me to Scrutiny to take you through the work of the RPB. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the regional lead working on behalf of the 2 councils and the health board, and of course all of the partners within the regional partnership board. So I'll take you through our annual report for last year, and where you've had a very busy agenda, so I'll keep it brief, and there's a lot of detail in the report. Of course, to start with, just to make the point that the RPB itself only meets 4 times a year, but it's so much more than a meeting. It reflects the work that we do all of the time, every day, as a partnership, working across the whole system. And of course, over the last year, the Vale now plays an even more significant role in the delivery of the RPB work, given that Councillor Ben Gray is now the chair of the RPB. So we're required by statute to summarise the work of the partnership within an annual report, and that's what I've shared with you. And I'd really encourage you to dip into that. There's it's a nice, easy read. It's got some really great stories, and it's really focused on the impact, the real impact on real people. I think sometimes the RPB gets a bit of a reputation as a bureaucratic entity, and we certainly are good at that, but ultimately this is about making a change for people out there within the Vale of Glamorgan and across the region, and there's lots of stories and links to videos that really emphasises that within the report. So I'd really encourage you to look at that if you haven't had the chance to. So even though COVID really has dominated our lives over the last 20 months or so, which I don't need to tell any of you about, it is really good to see just how much we have achieved as a partnership over the last year. And in fact, that strength as a partnership has helped us get through our response to COVID. Some of the direct examples are around getting people home if they've ended up in hospital, significant amount of work by the third sector supporting vulnerable groups, particularly around social isolation and avoiding that. Grants into care homes to enable care homes to enable people to meet their loved ones, but in a safe way, and a huge amount done on reducing the impact of social isolation, which has been such a major impact of COVID, as you know. I'm just going to pick out some headlines from the report, if I may. So I think to start with, as a partnership, we every year take a joint approach to winter and the challenges that brings, and the RPB has very much been central to coordinating that approach and enabling the Vale to bolster its capacity, notwithstanding all the challenges that you've already raised in terms of securing those staff. There's been a significant amount of capital development, so you'll be aware of the work we've been doing over the last couple of years or more around increasing the dementia-friendly environments within our care homes, the development of the Llantuit major hub for Glamorgan voluntary services and the local community, and the really great development in Penarth around the smart house, which enables people with learning disabilities to really have an opportunity to learn independent skills and so on. One of the major changes that we've made in terms of the way we organise ourselves as a partnership is we've moved into thinking about life stages. So we're now chunking our work up into starting well, living well, and ageing well. So that really puts the focus on thinking as a partnership what it would take to enable children and young people, for instance, to start well in life. So really thinking about that from that point of view. So very, very person-centred. Similarly with living well and similarly with ageing well. We've got the Starting Well Partnership and the Ageing Well Partnership in place. We're looking at what our arrangements are around living well, because that covers such a wide spectrum of services, including learning disabilities and services for people who are autistic, mental health services, carers, and so on. So we're very keen that whatever arrangements we put in place for living well really does genuinely add value. So in terms of the headlines from those three life stage areas, I'm just going to highlight one or two, just to give you a flavour of the kind of work that the partnership has been doing. So in the Starting Well arena, big piece of work at the moment that's involved the Health Board and the Vale of Glamorgan Council and Cardiff Council around putting in place a truly joint arrangement for children and young people that end up in an acute hospital setting because they've hit crisis and there hasn't been any other way of meeting their needs. So working very closely with Rachel Evans as the lead in the Vale of Glamorgan around establishing a recovery from crisis model where we can get those children and young people into a place where they'll be in a psychologically informed environment, where they'll be looked after, they'll have their care needs met, but they'll also have that therapeutic support that they need. So we're working through that at the moment. We are also very mindful that we need to shift our approach to children and young people who have emotional wellbeing and mental health issues, so that we're taking much more of a wellness model approach. At the moment, it all tends to focus towards getting the child in front of the psychiatrist, whereas actually we need to be more mindful about the support we give them in schools and in their homes, and thinking about how we keep those children and young people well in the first place, and thinking more of a truly whole system model. In the Living Well arena, lots of work has been going on around supporting carers. There's a really powerful interview, if you've managed to follow the link in the report, to a Channel 4 news interview around the Time For Me project, which is just really heartwarming to see. And of course, the work of the Cardiff and Vale Carers Gateway has been very much supported and driven by the Regional Partnership Board. In the Ageing Well arena, a huge amount of work going on here. So we've really focused in on our at-home programme, which does what it says in the tin. It's all about what can we do as a partnership to enable people to stay at home for as long as possible, or if they do need to end up in hospital, how do we really focus on getting people back home. So that's all about how we coordinate our efforts across the third sector and the health board and the councils to link our services so they're much more, again, person-centred and coordinated, so people don't feel like they're bouncing around the system, but we come to the person focusing on what matters to them. And that involves a really wide range of initiatives around how we coordinate and improve access into our services. So Cardiff One Vale Wellbeing Matters services is absolutely central to that. The development of integrated local teams, so really joined up teams linked to GP practices, so that we can really coordinate how we support people and keep them independent. And then, of course, putting the right response in place in a crisis should somebody reach that position. So those were just a few headlines. There's lots more within the report. In terms of our forward look and where we're going next, there's been a significant change in the funding regime, which we are working through at the moment. So Welsh Government have announced just before Christmas a regional integration fund. That's a 5-year fund. It's intended to put us on much more of a stable footing and to plan much more strategically in terms of what we want to achieve as a partnership. There is a significant push from Welsh Government that the new models of care that we test and develop as a partnership ultimately get embedded as new ways of working rather than discrete projects. Of course, you've heard all about the population needs assessment and the market stability report from Emily and the public health team, and that will really we'll start to work through what the policy implications are as a result of that assessment, and that will translate into our next area plan as a regional partnership board. So just to wrap up and summarise, I think, the RPB is a symbol of the partnership, and it continues to have impact and to drive improvement in spite of the challenging environment that we've been operating in and that you're very, very familiar with. And finally, just to reiterate, I'd really encourage you to dip into the report and some of the video links which really bring it alive and demonstrate the real impact on local people. I appreciate your time for considering the annual report. Thank you.
Thank you, Kath. Thank you for giving some insight and very detailed information on the report. Hi, Councillor Grace, you got your hand up. Would you like to?
Thank you. Yeah, just to round off what Kath's saying with my RPB chair's hat on, I think it feels very different giving the report this year round to the last time we had an annual report, and in fact the time before, where we were talking a lot about GP triage. We're in a very different position across a lot of the health settings and things like CAV 24/7, and how we talk about how we access care, and our understanding and our knowledge is so much different through the COVID process. But the point I wanted to make is the themes that you see in the subheadings around, autism, carers gateway, all the things which Kath referred to, that they're not alien to you, and they shouldn't be, because these are the themes which at Scrutiny we've been talking about and we've been discussing. And so I'd be more concerned if there's something in there that you haven't seen. And actually, to be honest, that's more of a prompt potentially for you as a Scrutiny committee to potentially want to look more at that area, because everything within the partnership should be happening across the partnership. And it may well be that we commission things alongside Cardiff and they're delivered by Cardiff or by a third sector partner, or we're delivering them on behalf of the whole region. But really the themes there show a vast amount of work, and I think we're beginning to see a a structure that makes sense in terms of how we can deliver and quantify and make sure, and things that you've also heard about, like the NEST approach around young people and accessing information. And again, there are members on the RPB from the education area, from housing as well. So in many ways, a little bit like we take corporate safeguarding around all the different committees, it's getting to the point where we probably should be at least giving them a heads up of what's happening within the RPB in other parts of the council. But I think it's been an incredible amount of work in support of sometimes second stage support of the COVID impacts, but equally also some of that frontline stuff, providing those facilities in care homes is one of those capital examples. But just really to highlight, I'd love to hear, and I'm sure the team would, if there are particular areas that you don't feel have been on the radar for scrutiny so far, because then we just need to do more to build into our processes how people understand that. So that's all for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Thank you for. Would anyone else like to ask any questions or raise any comments on the report or update? Okay, so we have two recommendations to consider the work being undertaken by the Regional Partnership Board and to be in agreement that we receive further annual updates. So are we happy to move forward with this? I propose. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Aviett. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Kath.
Okay.
And thank you, Councillor Gray, as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, we can move on now to agenda item 7, so it shouldn't take too long. So this is the third quarter scrutiny recommendations tracking for 2021 and 22, an updated committee forward work programme schedule for 2021 and 2022. So I'll just give you some insight on where we're at then. So there's two appendixes to this, A and a B. So Appendix A, so all the actions are completed. So if we have any questions on these completed, then Amy's happy to answer them. And then we got the Appendix B then, which is the future changes. So we have a paragraph on this item 2.3. So this is basically outlining what's going to be the forward work program and what's going to be changing. Just to highlight as well that after the publication of the agenda, there's a change to the annual placement report, so it'll be yearly as opposed to twice a year. So that's basically the two items. So that was in paragraph 2.3 and the additional change to the annual placement report. So does anyone have any questions on what I've just said or anything that's in the forward work program? Looks like we're all happy as it is, and the changes and how we're going to move forward to May. Okay, Amy. Do we need to move or anything on that one, or that's all good?
Yes, please, Chair. Move and second,
okay.
Please.
Okay, I shall move then because I'm happy as is. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Jarvie. Okay, brilliant. So we have agenda item 8, just to wrap this up with agenda item 9. So I don't have anything urgent, agenda item 8, and then nothing on agenda item 9 either. So we're all done other than to understand when the next meeting is in Feb.
Yes, Chairman. The next meeting is, I believe it's the 8th. Let me just double check, sorry, because there's several meetings in my head at the moment. Yes, that's correct. The 8th of February is the next meeting.
Okay, brilliant. It'll be here before we know it. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening, and I shall see you all next month. Bye now.
Thank you, Chair.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Thanks, Chair. Good night.